very much. And we are now ready to move on to our next presenter today, the keynote address on intra-Africa trade, the Pan-African perspective. Representing Mr. Tay Konzi, the ECOWAS Commissioner for Trade, Customs and Free Movement, today we have Mr. Kolawole Sofola, Acting Director for Trade. Kola has had over 20 years of experience in public and private trade and private sector development, and he is currently Chief Negotiator for ECOWAS in the Africa Continental Free Trade Area negotiations. So he has a lot of experience and understanding of the AFCFTA, and I believe that's what he will be talking about now. So if I could hand over to you, Kola, you have 10 minutes for your presentation.
Thank you very much, Ted. Good morning. First of all, I would like to thank Ecobank for inviting the ECOWAS Commission to participate in this group initiative. I give my greetings to the Managing Director, the Regional Executive of Ecobank, as well as the Group CEO, and also to my excellent friend and brother, Mr. Kolawole. It's good to see you here on this platform. My big greetings from the President of the Commission and from the Commissioner, and he sends his apologies for not being able to participate, but he said I should make the following presentation on his behalf. I'm hoping you can see my screen. I believe I have 10 minutes, so I'll go straight to my points. So the presentation was to focus on the intra-Africa trade, the Pan-African perspective. What is the African Continental Free Trade Area? Just in simple terms, it's a very comprehensive agreement that seeks to create a single market for goods, services, and free movement of persons through the progressive liberalization of markets for goods and services, and also contribute to the movement of capital and natural persons to facilitate investments. And it's meant to be the foundation of a continental customs union at a later stage. It's being negotiated in 3 phases. The first phase covers goods, services with a dispute settlement mechanism. The second phase looks at competition policy, intellectual property rights, and investment, and then that will be followed by a phase on electronic commerce. If we look at the agreement itself, the agreement is broken into a number of areas. The first area, if you look at trading goods, has 9 annexes and 3 appendices. We have a protocol on trade and services that has a schedule of specific commitments with a list of priority sectors. We have a protocol on the rules and procedures for the settlement of disputes. And like I've mentioned, in the subsequent phases, there'll be protocols on investment, competition policy, intellectual property rights, as well as e-commerce. If I can focus just a little while now on trading goods, what we have presented here is that the modalities for the liberalization of goods is meant to be done through a certain framework. That framework is being split for non-least developed countries, so the slightly larger countries, and then least developed countries that will have additional time to liberalize. The goods are being split into 3 categories. 90% of the goods are deemed A, to be liberalized first, and then we have sensitive products, which will be 7%, and then we have 3% that would not be liberalized at all. Now, you need to consider that ECOWAS is a region that has non-LDCs as well as least developed countries. The majority of our members are least developed countries, so we have opted for the option to be considered as a customs union of least developed countries with a longer transition period. So we would have 10 years to liberalize goods, 90% of our goods in A, and then we'll have 13 years for 7%, and 3% would not be liberalized at all. They'll be kept as exclusion. But what do we have here? The opportunities. Based on studies by the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, there are significant opportunities for the AFCFTA if you consider the ECOWAS case. And these are based on some indicative figures because we're yet to conclude our tariff concessions, but indicatively we know that ECOWAS trades largely with non-African partners. Approximately 85% of our trade goes outside the continent, particular to the European Union, to India, US, China, to name but a few countries. So there is an invaluable opportunity to try and bring some of this trade back towards the continent and increase business opportunities for agriculture, services, energy, and mining. And we can see from some analysis that there could be a potential gain of over $10 billion by 2040, in particular, and you can see a large segment for the industry where there's a potential to bring more of these trade in between African countries and outside the region. But we should look at some of the disparities as well. We know that we are not a homogeneous community, so there will be pronounced differences at country levels. The share of the gains in exports is found in industrial products, in particular for Benin, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, Senegal, Togo, and Cote d'Ivoire. And we can also expect the AFCFTA to bring significant stimulation for exports in industrial products, as well as agricultural and food products throughout the community as well. We should not forget that part of the scope of the trade for the AFCFTA, it is not just in goods, but it's in services as well. Our economies are largely also becoming more and more service oriented. And part of the phase one negotiations is to also liberalize trade and services. And the AU summit had prioritized 5 sectors initially. Those are the business and professional service sectors, communications, financial, transport, as well as tourism and travel related. So these were the first 5 to be prioritized for liberalization, although the remaining will then follow in subsequent rounds of discussions. So services is extremely important, and I think it's a good point Ecobank would want to take note of. So what is the status of the AFCFTA negotiations and the ratification process? Almost all African countries have signed, bar one. And within those signatures, all ECOWAS member states have signed. We have 28 countries that are state parties, which meant that they have not only signed, they've ratified, and they have deposited the instrument with the African Union. Within the community, we have 10 ECOWAS countries that have done this and are considered state parties. And the new date for expected starting of trade for the AFCFTA is to be the 1st of January 2020. We should recall that the AFCFTA is part of a holistic program to boost intra-Africa trade. In fact, when it was launched in 2012 by the 18th Ordinary Session of the African Union of Heads of States, it was also accompanied by a boosting intra-African trade initiative and an action plan. And this action plan had 7 key policy areas that I looked into. But all this will be shared in my presentation, so I'll not dwell upon that. But what I wanted to emphasize was the need for enabling and complementary reforms to accompany the implementation of the AFCFTA itself to ensure its success. And some of these reforms are in this slide, which I took from the UNECA, the 9th Assessing Regional Integration in Africa profile. And it focuses on reforms needed in investment, in production, export compliance, and transport logistics, but to name a few. And some of these are already taken into account as part of the implementation of the agreement. So in the top half, you can see references to a number of articles within the agreement that seeks to promote these areas. And in the bottom half, we also expect national and regional, as well as continental policy reforms to also accompany these. The CEO of NEPC has mentioned, for example, the Nigerian Industrial Revolution Plan, and many countries have their investment plans and industrial policies, and we continue to promote and encourage them to use these to further boost the opportunities available under the AFCFTA. And trade facilitation is extremely important as well, and we need to ensure we reduce all the non-tariff barriers across the continent. More specifically to the ECOWAS region, I would just like to conclude by just highlighting a number of initiatives that we have. We have the ECOWAS Trade Liberalization Scheme, which affords us the opportunity to move goods within our community duty-free. And we also have the ECOWAS Customs Code that seeks to harmonize and improve the efficiency of our customs administrations. We have the ECOWAS Investment Code and Policy to seek to attract more investment, and To promote transparency, we have trade intelligence and information initiatives. To boost production, we have the West African Common Industrial Policy. And to ensure a fair level playing field, we recently established the Regional Competition Authority that is based in Banjul. One of our key areas of focus as well, bearing in mind the level of small-scale traders we have in our environment, is to ensure we provide support to these small-scale traders to ensure that they can move their goods as freely as possible with limited constraints, because they actually form the majority of our marketplace. And there's a particular focus on women and the youth. So the final word I'll say as I close is that there should be a key focus on industrialization, and not just on the typical manufacturing aspects of it, but bearing in mind the fourth industrial revolution, or some call it the first digital revolution, we need to focus on digitalization. That will be key to improving processes, to making our work more efficient, and also in the fight against COVID, to promote social distancing as well. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. I thank you very much for your kind attention, and Ted, I give the floor back to you.
Thank you very much, Kola. That was extremely interesting, and I think really shows actually how vast-ranging the number of issues are when it comes to creating a free trade area, knitting together so many different countries and cultures. You mentioned the importance of digital and digitalization. I just wonder if you could give a few examples or areas where you really think digital is essential when it comes to putting together this free trade area.
Well, first of all, foremost, the importance of digitalization was recognized by having the phase 3 on e-commerce. And in fact, the heads of states want to advance discussions in that area. We've seen by the COVID pandemic that we've had to rely more and more on the usage of e-commerce to try and promote physical distancing. And banks such as Ecobank, which by the way, we obviously have a long relationship with, born from the inspiration of the region, is to promote and provide the payment systems, the platforms for buyer, seller exchanges. And within the AFCFTA, it plays a critical role to connecting buyers and sellers as well. We know that part of the challenges, especially for micro, small and medium enterprises, is the ability to identify customers due to the high startup costs. So we believe, especially with the growing population of our youth, that this is very critical to ensure that it's going to be a very holistic, a very participatory and inclusive agreement that brings together women, youth in a platform that is efficient and also helps promote and fight against the current pandemic we're facing. And Ecobank will have a key role to play in that.
Thank you. I fully agree on that one. Maybe I could take a question which has been submitted by Victor, one of our delegates attending today. What is the impact of Nigeria's land border closure on the AFCFTA, and why has Nigeria not ratified the agreement? Maybe you could respond to those ones.
Well, I speak on behalf of the ECOWAS Commission, so I could not address the question of Nigeria, but from what we understand, and I think the previous speaker had mentioned, like every country, Nigeria had to ensure it did a conclusive consultation with all its stakeholders. And in fact, although Nigeria was later in signing, it was always part of the process of the negotiations. And I believe it's at an advanced stage in the ratification process. It's with the lawmakers, and I'm sure very shortly Nigeria will take its rightful place in the community of the African integration. The other question on the land closure, once again, it's more bilateral, but we are working with Nigeria and the neighboring countries. Committees have been set up to address the challenges. A number of action points that were raised have been dealt with, and we once again believe very shortly that all the issues will be resolved, and we'll be able to once again have a community that can trade freely across itself. But this is not reflective, I don't believe, of Nigeria's principle to ensure fair and free trade.
Yes, thank you very much. That's very clear. I understand from the ECOWAS perspective as well. One other question I'd like to ask is, If you look at the attempt to put together this free trade area, there are a series of existing trade blocs. We have ECOWAS, SADC, EAC, COMESA, the CFA Franc Zone, all of which cross over in different ways. Having an existing trade bloc must have advantages, but it must also bring its own difficulties. How do you see, in terms of ECOWAS, how does it fit as a piece into the CFTA, bearing in mind all of the complexities?
So first of all, I'd like to recall that when we all joined up to the African Union, we had the vision of moving towards a continent, an integrated continent. So this is actually part of the roadmap. The regional economic communities are considered as the foundation blocks, the building blocks. So we're actually a part of this process of integration. One of the issues that the AFCFTA is helping to address is the multiple membership of some countries in many regional economic communities. So it's actually addressing some challenges. Yes, indeed, we do expect during implementation, there may be one or two issues that will need resolving, but hence there's a dispute settlement mechanism. But just to say, it's part of the roadmap towards African integration. ECOWAS, as all the other RECs, is committed to this agenda that has been given by the African Union heads of states.
That's great. Thank you very much. Just one other thing. I mean, purely from a high perspective looking down, as a final question, where do you see the real benefit to come from this free trade area? There are so many different areas where it can help, and some generalities were made, but specifically for the ECOWAS region, where do you see the benefit coming?
Like you said, there's so many areas, but one of the areas I highlighted in my presentation was an industrial sector. There is an opportunity there on many of the products that we're seeking from outside the continent to source those within the continent. And for ECOWAS, that has a number of industrial powerhouses, we expect them to take opportunity of their production capacity, assuming that they can also address some of their constraints, to be able to provide these goods and services to the rest of the continent. So industrial products, certainly agro-processing, I believe, are areas where we can push forward, but in services as well, we also have a very highly motivated and high level of educated youth who will also be able to push through on services issues and on e-commerce issues as well.
That's good. Thank you very much, Kola. I'm afraid we've run out of time, so I would like to thank Kolawole Sofola, Acting Director for Trade at ECOWAS, for an excellent presentation and a really interesting discussion.